Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I, the one and only, Ray the Flying Squirrel here, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of The Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening Remake for the Nintendo Switch. So, last time, we've essentially did manage to explore into the first dungeon in the game, and that's what appears to be Tail Cave. So, in addition to that, we also did manage to keep on collecting some abundance of small keys, and on top of that, we also did manage to discover the first dungeon item, and that's what appears to be Rock's Feather. So naturally, we now have the ability to jump. So, that seems pretty cool. In addition to that, we also did manage to take down two bosses in particular. Like, for instance, we've already taken down the Spike Roller as the mini-boss fight. In addition to that, when it comes to the actual boss fight, we did somehow manage to take down Maldrum. And, relatively speaking though, we did somehow claim ourselves the first Siren Instrument, which appears to be Full Moon Solo. So, and of course, we did somehow manage to find some more goodies and what have you, such as, for instance, we did somehow manage to find ourselves the next piece of heart, and of course, we did found some more secret seashells. So, today for this video is about the fact that we're going to be continuing things on and move on to the next destination we're about to be entering into, and suffice to say, before we get into the forms of the actual specific objective we need to take care of, as you can tell, this particular building right there is actually new into this remake, and this what appears to be some sort of like a kind of a similar thing as the forms of, do you guys even remember playing Super Mario Maker? Usually not only for Super Mario Maker, but as well as the one on the 3DS, and even recently with Super Mario Maker 2. Basically though, is about the fact that we meet up with the forms of this familiar character, and that's what appears to be Dumpy. So Dumpy, he did somehow originally came from The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and also he did somehow also appears in Majora's Mask as well, at least as far as I'm guessing correctly. But it looks like at the moment right now we can't do anything in here at the moment because, well, we need to take care of the forms of that specific main objective first, and that's what appears to be we're going on to the Moblin Cave. So naturally speaking, we're going to be entering in there right now, and best assured about the fact that if I want to save my game, just in case I don't want to get my first game over in this entire playthrough, just like the forms of how it does it on the, well, the Game Boy Color version most likely. So anyway, so from the forms of Moblin Cave, basically though, we need to fight a whole bunch of Moblins, to be more specifically, that the first one right here, we need to take him on. So relatively speaking though, you have to able to block his attacks, and that's how you essentially how you can able to try to take care of him. And there's also 4 Moblins that are trying to able to throw spears at us. So relatively speaking though, it's about the fact that as long as you were able to actually use the shield correctly, and obviously though you'll be a much more comfortable to try to able to take down those Moblins. So, in addition to that, there's also Monopolin Chief right there, which obviously though is about the fact that in order to able to deal the amount of damage to Monopolin Chief, basically though you have to wait until when he finishes his attacks, and then when he does this, basically though you have to get away from him, and obviously though you have to wait for him to get smacked into the wall, and that way you weren't able to actually get a chance to able to keep on attacking him. So, pretty self-explanatory for the most part, and thankfully with more buttons to our disposal, unlike the forms of how it does it on the Game Boy / Game Boy Color version, well, this particular part won't give you that much trouble this time around. So because of that though, yeah, it's relatively a lot more easier compared to the forms of how it does in the original version, including the Game Boy Color version as well. And also because we still have ourselves 5 hearts to our disposal for the sake of time. So yeah, everything else checks out there. So either way, because as soon as we're able to actually try to take down the forms of the, you know, Monopolin Chief, as far as this is concerned, we can able to actually now entering to the next room right here, and suffice to say, we can able to actually meet up with Bow Wow right here. So we can now able to actually free him, and just like before, we can able to actually use him for a while, and suffice to say, he's also going to be very important for the sake of the forms of the plot progression, because as far as I'm aware, we need to use him to able to actually access to the second dungeon in the game. And suffice to say, we can now able to actually go into the swamp. So either way, A few things I want to talk about is about the fact that, well, today's date, of course, there is the 22nd of August today, in some cases in 2024 today. Now, suffice to say, it's now the best opportunity for me to able to actually discuss upon the most important aspect ever since about 3 days ago, right to this point. But obviously that was about the fact you probably already know that, with the forms of the most recent Nintendo Direct already came up to be, and as a result we're able to actually get ourselves the Nintendo Museum Direct, which I think is actually quite interesting. So relatively speaking, I was about the fact that I believe the host of that particular presentation was none other than Shigeru Miyamoto, which is obviously a cool thing, especially considering he's the most iconic person in the world when it comes to likely for Nintendo fans alike. So that makes sense. And as far as I'm aware, Shigeru Miyamoto has pretty much shown everyone else the forms of how the floors is actually going to place out to be. Like, obviously though, it's about the fact that one thing I do really appreciate, or one thing I actually do really loved about the forms of Nintendo Museum so far, is that they actually did somehow manage able to construct the actual game controllers, not just by the forms of the entire display, but it's also about the fact that they did somehow manage able to get every single region controllers for the likes of the forms of any other countries, ranging from Japanese Famicom, as well as the US and the European version of the Nintendo Entertainment System, and vice versa, which I think is actually pretty cool to me though, especially concerning for the fact that I would have loved to try to explore into a Nintendo Museum, but unfortunately though, it's about the fact that Japan is actually going to be quite far away from the UK country at this point. So because of that though, and as far as I'm aware, in addition to that, they also able to actually shown us the forms of not only one, but 3 different box arts on the forms of specifically NES games so far, which I think is actually pretty cool to me though, especially you can able to actually get ourselves our first glimpse of the actual comparison between whatever region you lived in. Like for instance, it's about the fact that he did show us, let's just say 3 different versions of Donkey Kong for the NES, alongside with Super Mario Bros. For the NES/Famicom versions. So yeah, that's actually pretty cool to me though. In addition to that, he also did manage able to demonstrate specific Nintendo toys back in the day, to be more specifically, Ultra Machine DX, alongside with the forms of Ultra Hand, and of course there's also the forms of this very cool interactive segment, which appears to be not only the NES Zapper, but also with this Super Nintendo Super Scope as well, and you can able to actually play a bit of a mini game kind of syndrome, that basically though you can able to actually just try to shoot down as many of those Mario enemies, including Koopalings as well, but you have to watch out not to shoot not only Mario, but also Luigi and Peach, because my guess is that you will lose points, I'm assuming so anyway. But usually, well, speaking of, that does seems really cool. In fact, it kind of reminds me of like a similar attraction as far as what I did somehow went into for the Super Nintendo World in Hollywood. That's what appears to be Bowser Jr.'s Shadow Showdown. During the forms of in Super Nintendo World, if you somehow managed able to get yourselves 3 key coins first until you're able to actually accept this challenge, well, I digress. So either way, and also in addition to that you will never believe what I just saw for about a few moments as soon as I able to realize there's actually some of these very cool game demo stations for every single Nintendo systems, ranging from, Nintendo Entertainment System, Famicom, Super Famicom, or Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, and even Nintendo Wii. And let me tell you, those controllers on the actual game demo station, they look huge, especially concerning for the fact that I could imagine about the fact that if I was trying to go into the Nintendo Museum, my goodness, it will be pretty weird to able to actually lift up a giant Wii remote on that specific demo station. So yeah, that's actually pretty cool to me though. Although I could imagine about the fact that if the Wii U were able to actually become a lot bigger than I was expecting, well, usually for the sake of the Wii U gamepad, most likely, but usually we'll have to wait and find out. And as far as I'm aware, he did confirm the actual specific date of the actual grand opening day for the likes of the, you know, Nintendo Museum. It's going to be opened up and during at some point until the 2nd of October. So, yeah, it's not going to be that far from you, though, especially considering for the fact that, obviously, though, we've only got about a couple of weeks left, and so he's not only able to actually proceed into the 9th month of the year, but it's also about the fact that we can almost guarantee able to actually make our way to October during at some point in about, you know, a next couple of weeks ahead. So, anyway, and, yeah, that was actually a pretty good presentation to me, though, especially considering for the fact that I love the fact that what the inside is actually, like, fully constructive and stuff like that, and I cannot wait to see more details. And as far as I'm concerned, they obviously updated the actual official website for the Nintendo Museum in Japan, to be more specifically. And also, from what I found out, not only does it contain a cafe there, but also it does manage to contain a mini shop, much like the forms of how it does on the Super Nintendo World. Well, usually relatively speaking, except the fact that I get the strong sense of feeling they might able to actually bring in different types of souvenirs, I'm pretty sure anyway. Well, then again though, we'll have to wait and see what happens and during at some point, and during the forms of in the beginning portion of October. So, yeah, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. Are you guys excited able to actually try to go into the Nintendo Museum in Japan once the actual opening day is about to be present on the 2nd of October, despite the fact that the actual time zone is a lot different than we were expecting to? So, either way though, yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below, and also what you think about the forms of how the Nintendo Museum actually looks like so far. Well, for me though, it does look pretty cool though, especially considering for the fact that I just love to see of how these controllers are actually in gigantic size, which I found is very unbelievable whenever I first saw these specific controllers are actually in ginormous form. So yeah, that's actually pretty cool to me though. And enough about that, so let's move on to the next topic at this point. And relatively speaking, do you guys even remember when I said this before about the fact that when it comes to the forms of The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening remake, as far as the forms of the heart pieces as far as I'm concerned, well obviously like I mentioned this before, we're able to get ourselves, even more pieces of hearts, more than the forms of how it does it on not only on the Game Boy, but as well as on the Game Boy Color as well. But do you know how many heart pieces they were able to actually bring in this remake this time around though? With a grand total of 33 or 32, I have no idea. Mind you, about the fact that it's been about 2 days ago since I actually have last played this game for sure, because obviously though it's about the fact that at this point in time that Maxi is almost going to be finishing up everything for Gloomy Manor on Luigi's Mansion 2 so far, concerning for the fact that he's now on to the first true boss in the game, especially to make matters even, well, make things a little bit more interesting though, that he might able to actually go back onto the previous missions that as far as he already accomplished with, especially now he able to actually got himself the actual Dark Light device. So this means he can now able to actually capture even more boos ever since in Journey forms of how the fact that obviously though, since in last year, that obviously though Luigi already did done the first Luigi's Mansion game back in last year, and a perfect opportunity to able to finish up that particular Let's Play during the course of a Halloween day. So yeah, that's actually pretty swell, but I'm not entirely sure if that's the case on Luigi's Mansion 2 or something like that. Well, we shall see what happens, especially considering for the fact that obviously that was about the fact that like you've already noticing this in Journey forms of our brief description for it. Obviously though, like I said before, is about the fact that when it comes to The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening remake, uploading schedules wise is going to be on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and meanwhile for Luigi's Mansion 2 is obviously going to be on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, because like what Maxi has already mentioned about this before, Luigi's Mansion 2 or Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, depending on what version of the game you play on, either on the 3DS or the Nintendo Switch, obviously though is about the fact that the game is going to get much longer than the forms of how it does it on Luigi's Mansion 1, including Luigi's Mansion 3, because obviously though, like what Maxi has already mentioned about this before, it's all about mission structure. So because of that though, yeah, you get the idea for this point. So Anyway, so we've come towards these types of enemies right there, and obviously though, that's what the shield button comes into play, and obviously though, if you activate the shield, then obviously though, you can able to actually knock these enemies over, so just in case you can able to actually try to take those guys down. So yeah, everything else checks out there basically. So anyway, speaking of something related to The Legend of Zelda, actually, I did found out about the fact that, yes indeed, about the fact that The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom will indeed have the actual amiibo functionality, and as far as I'm aware, it's actually fully compatible with every single The Legend of Zelda related amiibo, ranging from Super Smash Bros. Lineup, as well as a bunch of Zelda games basically, which I'll get to those in a second, because as far as I can tell, that players, if you do manage to able to tap in an amiibo figure, you'll be able to actually get additional items for their adventure and different colors for clothing, and that you can able to actually obtain throughout the game. So yeah, it's nothing groundbreaking or anything else like that, apart from the fact that unlike in The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD, that you do able to actually access to fast travel between both land and sky on the fly. So, relatively speaking, though, despite the fact you have to pay money for it when it comes to the forms of trying to get that particular Zelda and Loft Wing amiibo, which thankfully we still got, even to this day, especially concerning if you guys want me to suggest trying to able to tackle through The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword in the future, to be more specifically the Switch version, which is of course the HD version, just in case no matter what though, I won't be able to actually be having so many issues with the actual nunchuck support with the actual Wii Remote attached to it. So anyways though, so I get this strong feeling about the fact that when it comes to the forms of Dungeon 2, as you can tell, basically though we're able to actually come across into a bunch of pods, and gee, I wonder what specific item we can possibly try to get. Well, first of all, we need to get ourselves our glorious map, so just in case we can able to actually see what's up ahead when it comes to certain rooms eventually. So anyway, and conveniently enough, the shape of the actual map is almost like a bottle shape, because as far as I'm aware, the actual name of this dungeon in particular was actually called Bottle Gronto, at least as far as I'm assuming so anyway. So anyways, let's go ahead and open up this chest right here to able to get, what else, some more rupees. So that's actually pretty swell, especially concerning for the fact that hopefully I'll try to able to actually get even more items eventually. And also, booze is actually there. So of course we can't attack them with the actual regular sword. So instead we have to use the magic powder to able to go get these booze out of the room. And eventually though, we're able to get ourselves our glorious treasure chest. And what specific item we'll get in this chest? Well, believe it or not, we got ourselves the power bracelet. So this allows you to able to carry not only pots, but also rocks and all that stuff. So, and thankfully though, just like the forms of how it does it for both sword and shield, basically though, your power bracelet is now your permanent item. So this means you don't need to worry about constantly trying to able to keep on switching over different item inventories. So because of that though, again, I fully appreciate about this particular quality of life improvement right there, especially concerning for the fact that, like I said before, this makes the entire adventure a lot more easier this time around. Again, depending on what difficulty you select, either on normal mode or hard mode, so either way, I suppose, yeah, that's what I can really say about this, I guess. So anyway, let's get ourselves the next small key right here. So naturally, we can able to actually go ahead and progress onto the next bunch of rooms of this particular dungeon. So anyway, when it comes to the forms of certain Zelda-related amiibos that it's fully compatible with, well, I'll run down the list. There's Ganondorf from Tears of the Kingdom, alongside with Zelda also from Tears of the Kingdom, and on top of that, there's also going to be Link from Tears of the Kingdom, and there's also Zelda and Loftwing amiibo from Zelda Skyward Sword HD, and there's also Link from Link's Awakening Remake, which I'll talk more about the forms of how the amiibo functionality will work out to be in this particular remake, and during at some points once we're able to try to show off you know, with this particular additional thing that's exclusive onto the Switch remake. So for now on though, we need to take care of those enemies in a chronological order. So for instance, we need to take down this bunny looking enemy right there by simply able to actually toss the pot right at him. and I think we need to take down this particular bat right there, and of course we'll save the actual specific creepy looking enemy for last, because if you try to do this in the wrong order, well, you're probably not going to get that. Well, if I was assuming so anyway, that particular chest right there will able to contain a nightmare key, which, straight to the point, we can able to actually get that nightmare's key anyway. So now we've actually got that. Now we can able to proceed into by the end of this particular dungeon. But before I get into more about that, I need to make sure that I don't miss something. So because of that, let's go and enter this next room right here. So just to ensure about the fact that if I'm missing something, then obviously though I can able to actually easily double check on my map. So either way, back into what I was saying about the forms of certain amiibos will be compatible with. Young Link from the Super Smash Bros. Lineup, as well as the forms of the majority of Breath of the Wild amiibos, ranging from Arbusa, Durek, and Mepha, and Raphael, which are essentially those 4 amiibos I was on about earlier, are based off from specific champions or something like that. So, usually trying to able to control, well, as I say, the Divine Beasts or something like that. And in addition to that, Link from Skyward Sword, as well as Link from Twilight Princess, and there's also Link from Majora's Mask, and the Guardian from Breath of the Wild, and Zelda from Breath of the Wild, as well as the forms of Balloon from the likes of also from Breath of the Wild as well, and even Link Rider from Breath of the Wild, and Link Bow from also from Breath of the Wild. Seriously, there's a lot of Breath of the Wild amiibos during that specific time. Well, I suppose that makes sense, I guess. So, anyways, alongside with that, there's also Zelda from The Wind Waker. In addition to that, Toon Link from The Wind Waker, and we also get ourselves Link from Ocarina of Time, and even Link from, of course, The Legend of Zelda. And of course, we got ourselves Wolf Link amiibo from the likes of Twilight Princess. And finally, the majority of the remaining amiibos are entirely based off from the Super Smash Bros. Lineup, specifically for Super Smash Bros. 4, the Wii U, and 3DS, which are Ganondorf, Sheik, Toon Link, Zelda, and finally Link himself. So because of that, that's quite a lot of Zelda-related amiibos that's fully compatible for the sake of the forms of the upcoming The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. So yeah, that's actually pretty cool. So anyways, let's go ahead and take on the forms of the next boss in the game. That's what appears to be, what else? The Genie. So of course, that's what the Power Bracelet decided to come into play. So after when the Genie decides to able to actually finish his attacks, usually for the sake of trying to able to keep on tossing these fireballs at us, and as soon as he goes back into the bottle, basically though, we need to able to lift up the bottle and try to able to toss it into any walls, and potentially though, that'll be pretty much done, right? Well, actually, as it turns out, is about the fact that this boss only contains 2 phases. So, the first phase is pretty simple. It's about the fact that, like I said before, we need to dodge his attacks. So now we're on to the second phase, where this is where things gets a little bit trickier. Well, nowhere near is, like, extremely tough compared to the forms of how it does it in the original version this time around. Like, for one, that's his particular teleporting, attack is much slower than the forms of how it does in the original version, for I found out, including the Game Boy Color re-release as well. And relatively speaking of that particular projectile thing, as far as what the Genie did somehow send out, the actual movement of that homing projectile moves also a lot slower as well. And relatively speaking, you can now able to attack him almost instantly, assuming if we somehow get hit by the forms of that particular projectile attack. Well, either way though, we did somehow manage to able to finish him off anyway. So we get ourselves the next heart container. So naturally, that pretty much leaves us to 6 hearts. So yeah, that's actually pretty swell. And of course, we're able to actually get ourselves the next siren instrument right here. And that pretty much does it for the sake of the forms of Bottle Granto dungeon. So either way, yeah, pretty cool. So, anyways though, speaking of which though, what I've also found out is that during the course of the upcoming event, when it comes to gaming community and stuff like that, PAX West is also going to be able to expect to mention something about the fact that, yes indeed, not only does The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom will be at PAX West in 2024, but also, get this, Super Mario Party Jamboree is also going to be on its way on PAX West 2024, much like the forms of how it does it on any other Mario Party games in the past, ranging from Mario Party Star Rush, in addition to Super Mario Party as well. So I suppose that's kind of a cool thing, especially we can now able to actually be looking forward to seeing some more gameplay footage of Super Mario Party Jamboree at long last, after the events of 2 months ago, since the actual announcement of Super Mario Party Jamboree. But I'm still really excited to able to actually see what's anything else new is about to be on its way for the sake of Super Mario Party Jamboree. Well, I suppose we'll find out more about it probably at some point by the end of this month in particular, for August's sake. And on top of all that stuff, though, that could be also applies for The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom as well. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that particular, you know, more gameplay footage for the sake of Super Mario Party Jamboree, of course. So anyway, and also as far as I'm aware, is about the fact that when it comes to the forms of this upcoming SpongeBob movie until next year in 2025, that's what appears to be by the forms of the SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants. I did find out about the fact that the entire movie is going to be all about pirate motif or anything else like that, or a pirate themed movie or something like that. So yeah, I guess that's something, I suppose. Well, either way though, I suppose that's what I could really say about this, I guess. So anyway, so now we can able to actually lift up this, and thankfully though, unlike the forms of how it does it in the original version of the game, including the Game Boy Color re-release version as well, thank goodness, every time when if you do manage to able to accidentally do not lift up something, basically though, you get this very annoying message keeps popping up every time you forgot to equip the power bracelet. Well, that's not the case this time around though on this remake. So thankfully though, the pacing is actually a lot better than the forms of how it does in the original version, at least to me anyway, especially considering for the fact that, well, despite the fact that, again, every time when if you proceed into the next bunch of areas, obviously though, we might come across into a lot of slowdown sometimes, even especially noticeable. At one point it was actually 60 frames per second, but either way. So I suppose with that being said, folks, is that we're getting endings up at this point right here. So join me next time for more Let's Play of The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening Remake. Is that we're about to be doing quite a number of things before we get into the forms of the next dungeon, which appears to be dungeon number 3. So I suppose the entire process might take a bit while, and you'll see and find out until next Tuesday. So I'll see you guys until next Tuesday. Later, fellas.